Hey, my name is Edric Smith, and I will be talking to you all today about fire prevention. Fire prevention, it is the process of reducing the likelihood of a fire. So by preventing or reducing these hazards of fire, this will also lower the property damage and lives lost. Through education, enforcement, and engineering, we can achieve these goals. Civilian fire and firefighter lives are lost frequently due to preventable fires. Recently, we had a residential house fire that a child started in the trash can inside of a residence. So at the time of the incident, there was one child and there was one adult inside. Firefighters they arrived on scene approximately 3.5 minutes after the 911 call. When they arrived, heavy smoke and flames were already showing from the exterior of that residence. Five firefighters were injured. Two were in critical condition after that fire. So the two civilians that were inside the residence, they lost their lives that day. So educational programs in our communities and schools could have lowered the chances of that child starting the fire. It could have lowered the chances of parents leaving fire ignition sources within child's reach. So community risk reduction programs, they often also involve firefighters making visits to homes within their territory and educating on possible fire hazards and even the installation of smoke alarms. So ultimately, however, accidents and fires they are going to happen. So we must lower the impact that is associated with them. So through the practice of different engineering controls, we can reduce the chance of the fire and its impact. So building codes and standards they're implemented for the protection of everyone. Building occupancy limits and means of egress codes they ensure that in case there is an emergency there will not be overcrowding and that there is a clear means of egress. Our codes and standards division enforces these codes. It is imperative that building owners not only know the codes and standards but realize their importance. So during inspections, inspectors need to ensure that the owners that are educated on this, as well as scheduling follow up to ensure compliance. So our department we utilize the International Fire Code and the International Building Code for regulations concerning new and existing occupancies. Fire resistant building materials, they're important to protect, all occupants in case of an emergency. The codes reference the American Society for Testing and Materials for its standards on building materials. Gypsum board is a common material. It's used in most structures. The national gypsum products are tested at NGC testing services. They test the products to ensure they meet the standards for fire resistance. They utilize different tests, including the ASTM E119. Certain types of buildings have different requirements to meet that type of construction, whether it's type 1, 2, 3, type 4, or 5. So, depending on that type of building construction, they must have fire resistance rating that meets that international building code. So, in Chapter 6 of the International Building Code, it details the requirements for materials and fire ratings. The code in our area it requires that owners of vacant buildings, or structures, they keep the openings closed to prevent unauthorized entering of the structure. There are a lot of vacant buildings that have they've become grounds for drug users and the homeless. These structures are the ones that are commonly catching on fire due to arsonists, or people just trying to stay warm, so they start a fire inside these unoccupied commercial structures. So those are really the biggest concern in this district. A good portion of the city it consists of commercial structures, so they must be inspected to ensure that before a new business is erected, that the structure meets building and fire code compliance requirements. Through a plans review program, it will ensure that these structures that were once compliant, that they are actually still in compliance. New businesses, they'll commonly make alterations to the building, so these alterations, they got to be reviewed. Whether, are they trying to cover a required exit? Is the sprinkler system still in proper working order? These are things that are vital to firefighters and civilians that can be answered with a plans review program. Structural control, it'll ensure that the requirements set in the program, they're abided by, like fixed fire protection systems. So it's important that we have ongoing inspections as well to ensure things like occupancy requirements are not being exceeded. Ensuring that these buildings are in proper compliance, it will ultimately improve the safety of these structures in case of an emergency. This is, once again, it is vital for not only firefighters but civilians. Thank you.